The chandelier above the mahogany table cast long shadows across my father's face. I'd never noticed before how those shadows made him look like someone else entirely. Someone I didn't know, despite sharing his blood for 23 years. No. The word left my mouth quieter than I'd intended. Not defiant, not angry, just final. My mother's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. Marco, my oldest brother, stopped breathing. I could see it in the way his chest locked. Even Sal, who never stopped moving, went absolutely still. But it was my father's reaction that made my pulse hammer in my throat. Nothing. He didn't lean forward, didn't raise his voice, didn't slam his fist on the table like he did when suppliers tried to shortchange him. He simply looked at me with those dark, unreadable eyes that had built an empire on fear and blood. The silence stretched. 10 seconds, 20. Finally he spoke, his voice smooth as expensive whiskey. Think carefully, Vincent. You don't get to refuse twice. He stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked out of the room. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a coffin being sealed. You need to understand something about my father. Antonio Moretti didn't become the most powerful man in 3 states by accident. He became it by making examples, by ensuring that when someone heard his name, they remembered what happened to the people who crossed him. The Moretti family business wasn't drugs or prostitution. Those were for the desperate, my father always said. We dealt in legitimacy with illegal routes. Construction contracts that crushed competitors, unions that answered to us, politicians whose campaigns we funded and whose secrets we owned. Everything looked clean on paper. Everything was soaked in blood underneath. I grew up watching men come to our house at midnight, their eyes wide with fear, begging for extensions on debts they'd never be able to repay. Some of them left, some of them didn't. My father had a saying, loyalty isn't bought, it's bred. And in our world, if you weren't bred for it, you didn't last long. The family operated on a simple principle. You were either useful or you were a liability. There was no neutral ground, no retirement plan, no graceful exit. I'd seen what happened to my cousin Polly when he tried to start his own thing without my father's blessing. They found him 3 weeks later in a construction site buried under 40 tons of concrete. At the funeral, my father cried real tears. He'd loved Polly. That's what made it worse. I was never supposed to be like them. Marco was the heir, cold, calculating, perfect. He could slit a man's throat and order lunch in the same breath. Sal was the enforcer, all muscle and rage. My sister Gabriella ran the books with a mind sharp enough to make accountants weep. But me, I was the youngest, the mistake child, born when my mother thought she was done having babies. They tried to mold me. God knows they tried. At 12, they took me to my first meeting, watching my father break a man's fingers one by one for skimming money. I threw up in the car afterward. Marco laughed. My father looked disappointed. At 16, they gave me a gun and told me it was time to prove myself. I held it, felt the weight of it, and knew I couldn't pull the trigger. Not even at a target, not even to save face. My father took the gun back without a word. I learned to make myself useful in other ways, handling the legitimate businesses, going to college for finance, playing the role of the respectable son at charity galas. I thought maybe that would be enough, that I could exist in the margins of the family without drowning in its darkness. For 7 years, I'd been planning my escape, quietly, carefully. I had money set aside in accounts my father didn't know about, a job offer at a firm 3 states away, a new identity half prepared, just in case. I thought refusing would be the hard part. I was wrong. The hard part was what came after. The first thing I noticed was the silence. The day after the meeting, I woke up to find my usual security detail gone. The 2 men who'd followed me everywhere since I was 15 vanished. No explanation, no replacement. I told myself it was fine. I didn't need protection anyway. I wasn't the one making enemies. Then, my phone started feeling heavier. Friends I'd known for years stopped returning calls. My girlfriend Sophia, who'd been planning our future together, sent a single text, "I'm sorry, I can't do this." When I showed up at her apartment, her roommate answered with eyes full of pity and fear. "She's not here, Vincent, and you shouldn't be either." The door closed in my face. At the gym where I'd trained for 8 years, the owner pulled me aside. His hands shook as he handed me an envelope, my membership refund, paid in full. "It's not personal, kid. I got a family to think about." I understood then. The message had gone out. Quiet, efficient, devastating. The youngest Moretti son is no longer protected. But what made my skin crawl wasn't the abandonment. It was the surveillance. I'd catch glimpses of familiar cars parked too long on my street, faces I recognized from family gatherings, now watching me from coffee shops and street corners. They never approached, never threatened. They just watched. At Sunday dinner, because yes, we still had Sunday dinner, my family acted like nothing had changed. My mother passed me the pasta, Sal complained about traffic, Gabriella talked about a new investment property. My father sat at the head of the table, cutting his wheel with surgical precision, and didn't look at me once. The pretending was worse than any threat, because I knew what it meant. In my father's world, when you stop acknowledging someone's existence, it was because you were deciding whether they deserved to keep existing at all. My mother came to my apartment on a Tuesday night. She'd never visited before. I always went to the house. Seeing her in my small, deliberately ordinary space felt wrong, like watching a queen tour a prison. She didn't sit down, just stood in the middle of my living room, still wearing her pearls, clutching her purse with both hands. "Vincent, please," her voice cracked. "Just talk to your father. Tell him you've reconsidered." "I haven't." "Then lie." The desperation in her eyes made my chest tight. "You're smart. You can work the legitimate businesses. You don't have to get your hands dirty. Just stop this foolishness." "It's not foolishness, Ma. It's my life." She slapped me. Not hard. My mother had never been violent, but the shock of it, the break in her perfect composure, froze us both. "Your life?" Her laugh was bitter. "You think you have a life separate from this family? Everything you are, everything you've ever had exists because of your father. The air you breathe is his permission." She left without another word. 3 days later, Marco showed up. Unlike my mother, he made himself comfortable, poured himself my whiskey, sat in my chair like he owned it. "You know what Dad's like when people defy him?" Marco said conversationally. "He doesn't get angry, he gets thorough." "I'm not defying him, I'm just choosing a different path." "There is no different path, Vincent. There's in or there's gone." He leaned forward. "And gone doesn't mean they throw you a going-away party. It means they find you in pieces." "He wouldn't." "He killed Polly. You remember that? Our cousin. Blood. And you know what Polly's crime was? He wanted to open a legitimate restaurant without cutting Dad in. A restaurant, Vincent." Marco stood, buttoned his jacket, the same gesture our father always made. "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to save you, because when Dad moves, it's already too late." After he left, I sat in the dark for hours. But the worst visit came from my father himself. He didn't come to my apartment, he sent a car. The driver said nothing, just opened the door and waited. I could have refused, I could have run. Instead, I got in. We drove to the pier where the family kept a warehouse, the place where problems got solved, where people who refused second chances learned why they should have taken the first. But my father wasn't there to hurt me. He was there to show me silence. We stood at the end of the pier, watching the black water. He lit a cigar, offered me one. I refused. "You think you're different," he said finally, "special, above all this." "I think I'm trying to be better." He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. "Your grandfather built this family from nothing, came to this country with $8 and a dream. You know what that dream was, Vincent? not to be rich, not to be powerful, to be untouchable, to build something that could never be taken away. At what cost? At whatever cost necessary. He turned to me then, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment. Pity. You learn, son. You can't outrun your blood. He walked away, leaving me alone on the pier. But the message was clear. This wasn't over. The invitation came through Gabriella. "Dad wants you at Sal's birthday party," she said over the phone. "Just family, nothing business. He thinks it'll be good for everyone to see us together." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Vincent," her voice softened, "it's been 3 weeks. You're still his son. He's willing to let things cool down. Don't throw that away." I almost said no. Every instinct screamed at me to stay away. But part of me, the part that still loved these people despite everything, hoped maybe this was real. Maybe my father was accepting my choice. Maybe we could find a way to coexist. I was so fucking naive. The estate was at the estate, in the garden where we'd celebrated 100 family gatherings. String lights, long tables of food, children running between adults' legs. It looked almost normal. My father greeted me with a hug, a real one. "I'm glad you came," he said, and his voice sounded genuine. For 2 hours, it felt like I had imagined everything. The surveillance, the threats, the isolation. We were just a family celebrating. Then my father pulled me aside. "Walk with me." We strolled through the rose garden my mother loved, away from the party, away from witnesses. "I've been thinking about what you said," my father began, "about wanting a different life. I respect that." I waited. There was always a but with him. "But family is complicated, and I need to know you're still loyal, even if you're not active in the business." "I am loyal. I'm just—" I know. He put a hand on my shoulder. "So here's what I'm proposing. A test. Something simple. No violence, no getting your hands dirty." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "There's a city council vote next week. Infrastructure project. We need it to go a certain way. All you have to do is deliver this envelope to Councilman Pier. Have a conversation. Remind him of our family's generous support over the years." I stared at the envelope. "That's it? That's it? One conversation. Then I'll know you're still with us, even if you're pursuing other interests." It seemed so simple, so harmless. I took the envelope. My father smiled and pulled me into another hug. "That's my boy." As we walked back to the party, my hand felt like it was burning. I made it 3 days before I opened the envelope. Inside, photos of Councilman Pier with a woman who wasn't his wife. Bank statements showing deposits from shell companies I recognized. Medical records for his daughter's ongoing treatment that cost more than his city salary could ever cover. The message was clear. Vote our way or everything you love gets destroyed. This wasn't a simple conversation. This was blackmail. This was leveraging a man's desperation and secrets. This was the business, and I was now part of it. I didn't sleep for 2 days. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter like a bomb. I'd taken it out a dozen times, telling myself I could still deliver it. It wasn't violence. It wasn't drugs. It was just information. But that's how it always started, wasn't it? Just information, just a small favor, just a tiny compromise, then another, until you looked up one day and realized you were drowning in blood and calling it business. On the 3rd day, I made my decision. I burnt the envelope in my sink, watched the photos and documents curl and blacken and disappear into ash. Then I called my father. "It's done?" he asked. "No." Silence. "I can't do it. I won't." "Vincent, I know what was in that envelope, Dad. I know what you wanted me to do, and I can't. I'm sorry, but I can't." More silence, longer this time. "You understand what this means," he said finally. His voice had changed. Gone was the warmth from the party. This was the voice he used for business. Cold, final. "I do. You're choosing to embarrass me, in front of the family, in front of our associates. You're making me look weak. I'm choosing not to be part of this anymore. That's all." He laughed. It was the worst sound I'd ever heard. You think you can just walk away? You think saying no makes you clean? His voice dropped to a whisper. You've been part of this your whole life, Vincent. Every meal you ate, every school you attended, every opportunity you had, all of it built on the same dirt you're now too good to touch. I know, and I'll carry that, but I won't add to it. Then you've made your choice. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, and felt the world shift beneath me. Because I knew, really knew, that I just severed the last thread holding me to my family. And in my father's world, cutting that thread meant cutting my lifeline. They didn't come for me right away. That's not how my father operated. He didn't lash out. He calculated. First, my bank accounts were frozen. All of them, even the ones I thought were hidden. I went to withdraw cash and found my cards declined. When I called the bank, they apologized but couldn't provide details. Legal holds, they said. Nothing we can do. My apartment lease was mysteriously not renewed. The landlord, apologetic and terrified, handed me an eviction notice with shaking hands. 30 days, Mr. Moretti. I'm sorry, I have to think of the other tenants. The job offer 3 states away? Rescinded. No explanation, just a formal email thanking me for my interest. Every door I'd carefully left open was systematically slammed shut. But the worst part wasn't the practical destruction of my life. It was the erasure. I showed up for Sunday dinner because some part of me still hoped and found my chair gone. Not moved, not empty, gone, like I'd never existed. My mother looked through me. Gabriella pretended I wasn't there. Sal and Marco talked around me like I was a ghost. Only my father acknowledged me, and only to say, "This is a family dinner, for family only." I left without arguing. At Uncle Tony's funeral the following week, I stood at the back of the church. When the family processed to the grave, they formed a line that closed me out, physical, deliberate. I was there, but I wasn't there. My father had done something worse than kill me. He'd made me irrelevant. In a world where power and presence meant everything, he'd rendered me invisible. I could walk the same streets, breathe the same air, exist in the same city, but I was no longer part of the world that mattered. He'd created a prison without walls. I started getting the messages after the 3rd week. Notes slipped under my motel room door, anonymous calls that hung up when I answered, each one with the same underlying threat. You don't exist anymore, but we can make you disappear completely if we need to. I wasn't being killed. I was being erased. And I realized my father's genius. He didn't need to make me a martyr. He just needed to make me nothing. One morning, I woke to find a package outside my door. Inside, my birth certificate, my passport, family photos, everything that proved I was a Moretti. And a note in my father's handwriting, "Return what isn't yours." The message was clear. Even my identity belonged to him, and he wanted it back. The summons came on a Wednesday, not through a phone call or a messenger. My father simply appeared at the diner where I was eating lunch, a cheap place in a neighborhood where no one knew my name. He slid into the booth across from me, immaculate as always in his 3-piece suit, completely out of place among the cracked vinyl and grease-stained menus. "Walk with me," he said. It wasn't a request. We walked for 20 minutes in silence, ending up at a park bench overlooking the river. The same park where he taught me to throw a baseball when I was 7. "Do you know why I built this family?" he asked finally. "Power. Survival." He shook his head. "My father, your grandfather, he worked himself to death for men who saw him as less than human. 14-hour days in factories that didn't care if he lived or died. And when he got sick, they replaced him without a second thought." He lit a cigar, the smoke curling between us. "I watched him die at 43, broken and poor, and I made a promise. My children would never be powerless, never be at anyone's mercy. They would be the ones with the power to choose." "That's what I'm doing," I said quietly. "Choosing." "No," His voice hardened. "You're running. There's a difference." "I'm not running from anything. I'm walking towards something better." "Better?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think the world out there is better? You think those people you want to join, the ones with their clean hands and clear consciences, you think they're different from me?" "Yes." "They're worse." He turned to face me fully. "At least I'm honest about what I am. They hide behind laws and systems, but it's the same thing. Power taking from weakness, control masquerading as order. I just skip the pretense." "And that makes it right?" "It makes it real." He softened slightly. "Vincent, I'm trying to protect you. Out there, without the family, without the name, you're nobody. You'll be eaten alive by people who smile while they destroy you." "Maybe, but at least my hands will be clean." He studied me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across his face. Not anger, not disappointment, grief. "You really believe that, don't you? That you can wash yourself clean of us, of me?" "I have to try." He stood, brushing imaginary dust from his jacket. "Then this is goodbye, Vincent." His voice was steady, but his eyes were wet. "Not the kind where we see each other again, the real kind." "I know. You're not my son anymore. You understand that? Legally, emotionally, practically, you don't exist to me. And if you ever try to use the Moretti name, if you ever trade on what this family built, there will be consequences." "I understand." He nodded once, then did something that broke me. He reached out and touched my face, the way he used to when I was a child. "I did love you, Vincent. I want you to know that. Everything I did because I loved you." "I know, Dad. That's what makes it so hard." He dropped his hand and turned away. "Goodbye, son. Goodbye, father." I watched him walk back to his car, his shoulders straight, his head high, every inch the king of his empire. And I sat on that bench until the sun went down, mourning the death of my family while I was still alive to feel it. They found me 3 months later. Not to kill me, I'd almost have preferred that, but to deliver the final verdict. Marco came alone, which told me everything. If they'd wanted me dead, they would have sent Sal. Marco came because this was official, legal. He handed me a folder without sitting down. "Signed and filed this morning," he said. "You've been officially removed from all family trusts, holdings and inheritance. The name Moretti no longer applies to you. Legally, you're Vincent Calabrese now. Mum's maiden name. Dad thought that was appropriate." I looked at the documents. Emancipation papers, usually filed for minors. My father had somehow convinced a judge to grant them for a grown man. I was officially an orphan by choice. "There's more," Marco continued. His voice was flat, professional. "You have a new social security number, new identification, clean slate. But here's the deal. You never contact anyone in the family again. Not Mum, not Gabriella, not even at funerals. You're a ghost to us." "And if I break that?" His expression darkened. "Then you stop being a ghost and become a problem. And we solve problems, Vincent. You know that." I signed the acknowledgement form. What else could I do? "For what it's worth," Marco said as he turned to leave, "I think you're an idiot, but I respect it. You're the only one of us who got out." "I'm not out, I'm just elsewhere." He almost smiled. "Same thing, little brother, same thing." After he left, I sat with my new identity papers spread across the table. Vincent Calabrese. No family, no history, no protection. Free. The job I eventually found was nothing special, financial analysis for a small firm in a city where no one knew the Moretti name. I lived in a studio apartment, made friends who knew nothing about my past, dated a woman who thought my family was dead, which in a way they were. Some nights I slept soundly, proud of my choice. Other nights I woke up sweating, certain I heard footsteps outside my door, certain that my father had changed his mind, that exile wasn't enough. Those nights, I understood what my older brother had meant. I'd gotten out, but I'd never truly escaped. Because every time someone asked about my family, I had to lie. Every time I saw a familiar face in a crowd, my heart stopped. Every time I built something good, part of me waited for it to be destroyed by a past I couldn't outrun. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd refused the family business to keep my hands clean, but I spent every day hiding, lying, and looking over my shoulder. Was that really freedom, or just a different kind of prison? I still don't know the answer. 5 years later, I was having dinner with my girlfriend when the news came on. Antonio Moretti, alleged crime boss, died today of a heart attack at his estate. He was 68. He is survived by his wife Anna and his 4 children. 4 children. I wasn't even a statistic in his obituary. My girlfriend saw my face go pale. Are you okay? I'm fine, I lied. Just reminded me of someone. That night alone, I cried for the first time since I'd left. Not because I regretted my choice, but because I finally understood the true cost of it. I'd wanted to be different, to be better, to prove that blood didn't determine destiny. And I'd succeeded. But success tasted like ash in my mouth. Because in that family, refusing the business didn't make me free. It only made me alone, forever and completely alone. I'd escaped the empire my father built. I'd avoided the violence, the corruption, the blood. But I'd also lost every person I'd ever loved, every memory that mattered, every piece of my history. The Morettis would go on. The business would continue. The empire would endure. And I would fade into obscurity, a footnote that was erased before it was ever written. Sometimes late at night, I wondered if my father was right, if the freedom I chose was real, or just another kind of cage, one I'd built for myself, brick by brick with every refusal. I don't regret leaving, but God, the price of having clean hands was higher than I ever imagined. And some nights, in the darkness of my anonymous life, I can still hear my father's voice. You'll learn, son. You can't outrun your blood. He was wrong. You can outrun it. You just can't outrun what it costs you. And you spend the rest of your life wondering if the person you became was worth the family you lost. I still don't have that answer. I may never have it. But I wake up every morning, look at my clean hands, and try to believe it was worth it, even when I'm not sure I do.